History of Mental Health by Juan Luis Cortez Cervantes. First lesson on health and illness. To understand mental health, we have to approach the condition of life and its fluctuations. Let us consider life as a specific condition of certain bodies that we have called organic, since we have studied their structures and determined that what is alive can die, this process being irreversible. In the condition of life, we have observed that every living organism has a set of elements called organs, and that in the most advanced forms of life the organs are integrated into systems with certain functions for the maintenance of that organism or the species. These functions are determined at the cellular level, the cell being the basic characteristic element of life. For example, we as a human species have a digestive system within which our stomach is the organ in charge of chemically processing the food we consume. The stomach itself is made up of a type of cells that allow it to do its job, since its cells are structured in a certain way and interact with each other according to their structure. This kind of dynamic extends throughout the human body, where we have counted approximately 200 different cell types. For example, stomach cells are different from bone cells, and bone cells are different from brain cells. Recapitulating, there are various functions for various organs or their systems, functions determined at the cellular level. The study of cellular function is called physiology. That is, physiology studies the relationship between cellular structure and the function of the organs of a living body. If the cells are in good condition and if that particular organ is not physically damaged, the cells will do what they know how to do and the organ or system will allow the living being to sustain its life. These words are important: to sustain, since the dynamics of life itself is a permanent exchange of energy between the living being and its environment. An exchange that includes the process of death even at the cellular level. That is to say, everything seems to indicate that the process of death is determined at the cellular level, and at the same time death as an organic and natural process is not a diseased or pathological process. Although cells have a survival process that includes their origin and multiplication, the process of definitive death is also determined cellularly, as if life itself sought death as a process in its evolution, as an adaptive process. Thus, in this permanent exchange of energy between the organism and its environment, it is natural that an organism is part of a food chain, both at the cellular or microscopic level, and at the environmental level. Living beings are part of a series of threats to each other. In this scenario, an organic failure can compromise the state of life, and we have called some of these failures diseases. It is normal for a living body to get sick, as it can face the attack of agents that we know as pathogens. Being part of these pathogenic agents, some microscopic organisms or agents whose organic nature science cannot yet recognize, such as viruses. Or, an organism may have altered organs for other reasons that we will see later. We can imagine, think, or represent some agents that cause diseases as very small animals, who simply seek to live, but in doing so they harm us, at least some of them. Because, inside and outside of our body we also have a microbiotic system that is a normal part of ourselves. That is, some diseases are caused by the effect of a parasite, a virus, a bacteria or fungi, but in our body itself there are other viruses, bacteria or fungi that protect us from the effect of other agents. But let's not stray too far from the topic. If you want to know more, research the topic microbiome. To move forward, let's say that every living being, from the smallest animals to the largest and longest-lived trees, can see their lives affected by processes that we call diseases. These conditions are due to a cause and manifest themselves in the alteration of a natural function. However, these alterations do not always put an end to the life of a living being. Beyond the adaptation that some living beings have developed among them, the living beings have developed something we call an immune system. This system are our defenses against threats that could come from the environment. Small threats such as pathogens or microscopic organisms that can end our lives as they seek their own survival, and that of their species. In this double relationship between health and illness, we can see that the dynamics of life are primarily against life itself, which can become part of an ecosystem. We could say that we ourselves can become a disease for another living being that develops mechanisms against us, or that the microbes themselves evolve to acquire resistance against the antibiotics that we have developed as a civilization to combat the effects of various pathogens in our body. However, not all diseases are caused by pathogens. It is here where we can observe the linguistic or conventional character of the word disease or illness. That is to say, illness is at the same time an organic situation and a word that we use to indicate certain alterations of normality, Or in a general sense, we use the word sick or disease to indicate what is strange, unusual, or what seems to us to be of little use or non-functional. For the moment, let us not abandon the field of the biological and return to the other causes of what we today point out as disease. There are other types of causes, motives or reasons for those altered states of the function of an organ, and that can endanger the rest of the organism or call into question its integration with what the rest of humanity is accustomed to. These diseases are called non-infectious diseases and therefore are not contagious. Genetic disease is due to an alteration in genes, for example, cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome. Degenerative disease, this is due to the natural wear and tear of the body and its cells, such as Alzheimer's or osteoarthritis. Metabolic disease, this is due to the difficulty of processing some substances, such as diabetes or hypothyroidism. Autoimmune disease, in these diseases the immune system attacks the body itself. For example, lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. Environmental or toxic disease, these types of diseases are due to exposure to abnormal external substances or conditions. Nutritional disease, these types of diseases are due to a lack or excess of nutrients in a body, for example malnutrition or obesity. Psychological, mental or behavioral illness, these types of diseases mean alterations in behavior, stress management or so-called mental processes. Infectious diseases appear as a specific group, while non-infectious diseases are distributed in multiple categories, depending on the affected system. In public health, this distinction is reformulated as communicable and non-communicable diseases. Now, we must point out an important characteristic of all these non-infectious diseases. None of them have a cure. We have properly called them diseases because they are alterations of the function that we consider normal, taking different points of view to establish a point of comparison. But strictly speaking, there is no consistent evidence that indicates that point of view as universally valid. We will expose this limitation with two examples. The first example would be a common illness, the flu. The flu is caused by a virus, the influenza virus. The actions of this virus in the human body consist of physical alterations observable over time. The same subject can point out a before and after being affected by the influenza virus. And this alteration will be the reason why the ill subject actively seeks treatment and adheres to the same treatment in such a way as to get rid of the symptoms. On the other hand, the conditions mentioned above as non-infectious or non-contagious could have been present for a considerable portion of the individual's life. Or it is even possible that they have been conditions inherent to the subject's life since birth. That is to say, this person has always been like this and does not know, or it is not possible for him or her to alter their condition, their symptom or their illness. In both cases, although the condition marks a difference between the subject and the rest of the population, the condition itself could have a degree of naturalness towards the person. Here the word illness or disease could have a negative connotation in society, but it would be irrelevant for the individual, who does not recognize their own condition as something bad, strange or something that they want or can change. This familiarity of the subject with a specific and divergent physical or psychological condition will be a part of his or her daily life for themselves. Or the undesirable condition that is usually associated with the disease will not be as marked for subjects who have a non-infectious disease when they have learned to live with it as a natural part of their own life. On the other hand, the presence of this type of diseases in the life of the subject who has been diagnosed does not necessarily mean a specific pain or discomfort, but rather indicates subjects who live in statistically peculiar or specific living conditions. This is where we see that disease does not directly or literally mean a condition or pain or an abnormality in a person's living conditions, but rather a disease is understood as a variation between a subject and the statistical normality of a population. But it is clear that statistics is not a natural condition of life for the subjects or the population. Statistics are used to study the population, but the study itself is a way of acquiring knowledge. It is not part of a direct adaptation of a subject or a community to their living conditions. That is, statistics is a reflection, an image, a representation, or a way of knowing what some human beings call reality. In these cases, the disease is not a condition that can be indicated with a clear beginning, and it is likely that its end would be the moment in which the human subject dies. However, its diagnosis as a disease indicates a specific variation of certain functions or abilities that the majority of the human population has as natural, with its corresponding degree of intensity. variation that can be indicated as a disability or a particularity of said individuals, for example, color blindness, cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, or Down syndrome. Let's consider another example in old age. No doctor could say that old age is a disease because someone who is old is not young. But it is still common to talk about degenerative diseases or alterations in the function of different organs and systems caused by the natural wear and tear of the human body. And we do this out of mere habit, simply a use of the word disease or illness. That is to say, in addition to the disease being a natural condition, it is also a symbolic terrain. This statement can be understood in multiple ways. Illness can be a word that any human being, not just doctors or statesmen, can use to indicate what seems strange to them, even if whoever uses such a word does not have any medical or similar training, normality, and therefore, health being defined based on one's own criteria or opinion, educated or not. Under these conditions, it is worth asking ourselves, although there is a variation in the function of the organs and systems of individuals affected by non-infectious diseases, are the cells healthy or have deficiencies that explain the variations in the function of the organ or system? While studies indicate that damage and death of the body's cells explains the symptoms of non-infectious diseases, the same relationship between lifestyles, chromosomes, and cell regeneration strongly influences the degrees of cell degradation or death. That said, let's end this lesson by pointing out that as far as modern medicine has managed to advance, there are no pharmacological or other treatments that manage to stop or prevent these pathological effects at the cellular level. And also, if someone attacks you by calling you sick, remember that we are all different. Normality is something always changing. Normality is an illusion.